Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm excited to have our second week of office hours for corporate housing with questions and answers. Any thing that people might have submitted over the course of the week or want to jump on and comment, ask questions, you can come in live here on YouTube, or you can also message me on Instagram. We'll be keeping an eye out for questions. And then I do also have a couple of questions that have been submitted over the course of the week this week. Today, I do anticipate we'll run a little bit on the short side just because I do have another meeting kind of overlap. So apologies for that. So we'll kind of just get to what we have right away. And then, of course, you can always reach out and we'll cover any additional questions on next week's episode here. So the first question that we got during the course of the week this week is, what are the steps to transition a short-term rental to a midterm rental? This is actually something that comes up a lot, or I do find folks that are kind of doing a bit of a hybrid, which I've actually done myself. Sometimes you might see that hybrid model in scenarios with specific markets that tend to be highly seasonal and have a high season for short-term rental, and then when it's more of the off season, to transition it over to midterm rental. So, for example, the property where I have a personal experience doing that was in the Panhandle of Florida, where there was lots of short-term rental over the summer months, but then over the winter months, we would transition that to snowbird, insurance housing, corporate housing, things like that. The same thing holds true whether you're doing a hybrid or you're making the full transition over to a midterm rental. And that is the most important thing above all else, is managing your calendar and knowing that you have this goal in mind. And, once you make that decision, kind of set an end date and don't accept any more short-term rentals after whatever that date is. So theoretically, if I were to decide today, I'm going to do that with a short-term rental that's been operating, and maybe the furthest booking that I have in the future is 45 days out. Totally just making an example here. Every market's different. But let's just say that were the case, then I would go ahead and cut that off at that 45-day point and not accept any more bookings under 30 days. For future dates after that. Because what happens a lot of times is we have operators that may have listed their property with us, and we inquire to see if they have availability for a matching housing request, and they're not able to accommodate it because they have lots of little 2, 3, 4-day bookings further out on the calendar. And so that can be really difficult to manage. And it's really a shame when you see a case where someone has mostly available dates but has to turn down a 6-month booking because they have, maybe a total of 6 or 7 days sprinkled in over a certain period of time. And also the case is that with midterm rentals, when you get those requests, more often than not, they don't have the flexibility to wait. So let's go back to that example that I made just a minute ago, where maybe 45 days out is when you have the last booking. If that was a short-term rental booking, I should say. In that case, if there was a housing request that came in, whether it was for insurance housing, corporate relocation, whatever the specific purpose, they're usually not in a position to wait 45 days, do something else, and then move into that property. So in that case, it would really just be a lost opportunity. So it's something that you do want to plan for a bit. I mean, certainly, take seasonality into mind, things like that. So if you're in an area that does tend to have, busier short-term rentals over the summer months, let's say, you can go ahead and make that decision. I mean, of course, now here we are in November, but, let's say it's also a flip-flop, like, for example, Arizona, they tend to be busier. Kind of their on season is the opposite of what it is for Florida, for example. Yeah. So sorry. So in that case, the end of the season might be, let's say, theoretically, the end of March after people's spring break is over. And then they would want to make that transition into midterm after that busy season, which is over, which is something that can make sense because you want a little runway for planning for things like this. So if you were to do something like that, then you would go ahead and switch your calendar over starting with April 1st for stays of 30 days and up. And you really want to be careful even about that, taking those bookings that far out for a 30-day stay, because certainly the preference would always be for a longer stay. So you just have to kind of take those as they come and respond to those, and then kind of weigh the history of the property, of the area, that sort of situation. So that is the biggest thing as far as making that transition from short-term rental to mid-term rental. I mean, there's a lot of things that are always set up really well because the properties are already furnished. There are things like that. From a furnishings perspective, the other thing that you would want to take into consideration when making that change from short term to midterm is that you want to be sure that you have good storage, and dressers in particular. Those are not as important for short term rentals just because it's more of a vacation. People are just coming with their luggage, things like that. But when you're making that transition from short term to midterm rental, in many cases, you will need to bring in dressers, maybe nightstands that have drawers as opposed to ones that are just more like tables, and just really anything to do with storage in particular. So you kind of transition from things like sleeper sofas being important for a vacation rental to storage and just real world day-to-day living utilities being more important for a midterm rental. Taking a look at another question that we had submitted earlier this week, it is, so how do you set up properties to work for different types of stays? I think what the question is here is about like maybe if it's an insurance versus a corporate relocation, that kind of scenario. And once you have a property that's set up, of course, you do always have to make it work for all of the personas and the different types of stays that you might have. The biggest thing that I would say here is once you have a particular booking, if they haven't arrived yet, get an understanding of what brings them to the area, all of those sorts of things, so that any small changes that need to be made to make them more comfortable and to make it better for that setup, you can go ahead and make those between point A and point B. So for example, for corporate relocation, we tend to find that white linens, more similar to four-star hotel type finishes, those sorts of things are important. That comes for linens, towels, wall art, all of those sorts of things. But if I knew that I had a construction or a solar crew coming in those cases, we might want to shift the linens that we use. We might want to go from white to gray, something along that lines. We also might want to take a look at comforters, things like that. We want to make sure that we might have additional like dishes, glassware, those sorts of things. If we were going to be having a crew of men, for example, sharing a 4 or 5 bedroom home, there's a lot of different scenarios, but we do see those quite a bit. So just knowing the way that the space is going to be utilized and making those small changes that can make a big difference. I can think of an example of one construction crew that I had last year, and it was a 4-bedroom home with a lower level. It was a split level. It had a lower level family room, and there was a bedroom that was in that lower level that was traditionally set up as an office, but they shared that they needed to have a twin bed in there instead. So we moved the desk and chair out of what was the office into just kind of that main lower level family room, and then brought in a twin bed into that room. So those are really simple changes that you can make that allow you to accommodate those stays that are, going to be really core to your business. So don't overlook those small things that you can come in and change to make it a better fit for a stay. And then usually, there's some sort of storage, whether it's in the garage or you have some sort of storage facility available to keep some of the inventory of the types of things that you might need to make spaces more flexible. Another thing that comes to mind is a futon. In one example, actually, it was not quite a year ago, over the holidays, we had a family that had a renovation going on in their home, and they had a son that was going to be home over the holidays from college. And so they didn't need a separate bedroom for him. That wasn't a need that they had, but they asked if we could have a futon in the basement so that he could utilize that space just during that time when he was home over the holidays. That was a really easy fix. We actually happened to have a futon that was available that we had in storage. So we just pulled that out, put that in there for them, kind of changed the configuration a little bit, and it made a really big difference. So those are the only questions I have right now. Just looking back, you can send questions on Instagram, in the comments here, on Facebook Messenger, any of those different places, or certainly reach out over the course of the week in any way so that we can make sure and address those questions that we might not have gotten to today. Or if you see this after we're live, just go ahead and comment, and we'll make sure that we answer those questions in our next episode. So again, short episode today. Apologies for that. Please do reach out with other questions that you have. We'd love to get those in the next episode. Next week will be interesting because it's Thanksgiving week. So it'll be interesting to see who we have and what questions we have. So have a great day. Thanks for joining.